Good evening, poultry keepers, and like to welcome you to Poultry Keepers 360. Tonight is all about Brahmas, but unfortunately, our guest hasn't showed up tonight. So we thought what we would do is just start off with a little bit of question and answers. If y'all have some questions, we'll try to come up with some answers for you. So coming up in just a few minutes, or a few seconds, we are going to get this puppy on the road. And we are back. Carrie and I are here. Jeff is out and about on his little tour de force that he normally makes in the fall of the year out west. And heard from him this morning, and he was in Montana. So I've got my wife has a cousin that lives in Montana, and I saw where he posted this morning. It was 38 degrees at his house. So probably a little bit side there. I wouldn't mind having some of that cooler weather here, Carrie. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of sweating.
I would be real happy with cooler weather. It's to the point that when I walk outside in the mornings, I sweat before I get to my vehicle, and I'm done with it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to tell you another thing that I have learned is if you're in the South, you need to be in HVAC because this time of year is the busy time of year for those guys. And hey, I'm not hating on anybody for making their money, but I had to call one over to my house yesterday, and he said, "This is your problem. This is your problem." You know, it was like duct work and, nothing major. I said, "Okay, what's going to be the total?" $985. Like, And then John, he's over there rubbing it in. Frost is already here.
John, shame on you for doing that.
I know, right?
Oh, golly bum. I just had an idea, and it just totally went completely out of my brain. So I don't know how many of you guys that are listening are still incubating eggs or getting ready to incubate eggs. Fall hatching season is going to be here before we know it. Carrie, are you setting any now?
For me, I have a couple of my game chickens that have gone broody, which, I mean, this time of year in the South, do you even need an incubator or a broody hen? I mean, I think if you just leave the eggs out, the heat's going to be there. But bless her heart, she's sitting on 6 eggs. And aside from that, a lot of them are like, it's too hot for this. You know, they're not wanting to do anything. And, for me, it's a lot easier to keep my barn warm than it is to keep it cool. So I don't really try to do a whole lot of brooding this time of year. I'm actually a huge fan of hatching October, November, December. I like to hatch those months.
Yes, I agree.
And for me, I will put them outside between 5 and 6 weeks. And that's sometimes it's closer to 5 because, you and I have the same line of reds. And with them, I mean, as soon as their real feathers come in, they're hardy birds, and put them out. And I found that birds that go out in the cold over January, February, they're outside at that point in time. They grow up to be hardy birds. They're new. You don't have to worry about them not eating properly like you do in the warmer months.
Right.
Because it's easy to control their diet. And, it's the vigor behind a bird that lived outside in January and February is high. And to me, them taking in all of that, I mean, it makes for better plumage, and that's my opinion. But the plumage looks better. It's thicker, and it's, I don't know. They even have a better feel to me. I've tried hatching in the summer months, And when you have a large fowl that feels like a game bird, that math ain't mathing. And I don't care what you feed it. Sometimes it's tough.
Well, not only that, those summer temperatures just down here in the south, it just basically pretty much puts the brakes on young birds trying to grow because they don't deal with the heat. And when they're suffering from the heat, they don't eat. And when they don't eat, they don't grow. We've had a few comments here. Heather Terrell said, haven't started yet. Quit last spring. But
yep, that's me. I quit late in the spring too.
And let's see, John Gunnerman had one here too. His fall hatching begins in October. That's when I like to hatch mine. Basically as a way to have birds ready to show for the fall shows, because with my reds, they mature so slow. You just can't get the males ready to show if you hatch in the spring.
No, you need those 10, 12 months.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Laura Elwood, bless Laura's heart, she's getting her ready to set a few dozen this weekend.
Oh, that's what I'm talking. And for me, that I've got 2 cabinet incubators and a hatcher, and loading that thing up the first time is almost as exciting as when you're in lockdown and you hear that first chirp, and then it turns into about 150 to 200 chirps.
That's when you know you got it bad, when you get excited about that kind of stuff, y'all.
I mean, just thinking about it's exciting to me. There we go.
Here we go. Laura just set some, I don't know whether that's today but apparently right recently. So
yeah.
Carrie, I know one thing that I wanted to get you to talk about.
All right.
This past few days, I have answered a lot of questions about how much feed to feed chicks and young adults and adults for the breeder supplement. And correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But basically, if you're feeding them right, because each one of those different age classes is going to eat a different amount of feed. The basic measurements work for everybody.
Yeah. So what I always tell everybody is, some people say, oh, a teaspoon of this or that, or, whatever it is. I tell them to look at the poundage.
Yep.
Okay. So most people that I know now, we're in a safe space. So you can admit how many birds you have. We're not telling anybody's spouse. But it typically comes in a variable of 50. Now, some people it's 25. Some people it's 100. But that 50 number is a really good number. And with that in mind, if you're feeding a regular off-the-shelf feed, you're going to fill a 5-gallon bucket halfway up. That's going to give you about 12.5 pounds of feed, roughly 4 ounces per bird per day. That's 50 birds. You're going to take your breeder supplement. You're going to get you a cup, 8 ounces. And it's not rocket science. If it's a little over, a little under, they're going to be better than what they were. Dump that 8 ounces in the bucket. Take your favorite oil. Me personally, I prefer coconut or olive oil, but you can also use canola oil. Really and truly, if it's something that you can cook with and you can eat, so can they. Give yourself 8 ounces in that cup, dump it in there, mix it up. If you've got 25 birds, you just made enough feed to feed them for 2 days. Simple. If you've got 50, obviously that's what you're going to need that day. the key to that part of it is when you mix the oil and the breeder supplement and the feed all together, when you do a good mix with your hand, a spoon, or whatever you use, it's going to stick for a couple of days. And then that oil is going to kind of dry out. And I mean, you can start over and put some more oil in it and mix it up, and the supplement will mix back in with the feed. But when you mix more than enough for 2 to 3 days, and you have to do that, then you may be getting the fat content too high, unless you're using coconut oil, because the fat content in it's not real high. But that's the easiest way to do it. Now, for chicks specifically, since we're talking about hatching, I have recently seen a situation where a guy, and this person, he hatches out 1,000+ birds a year for his program. And people buy those birds all over the country. This guy actually free choice feeds breeder supplement. Now, with what it costs by the pound, that could get expensive. But instead of mixing it in with his feed like he does for all of his other birds, he feeds them a good quality chick feed, a chick starter feed that's non-medicated. And he takes one of those simple feeders and just drops breeder supplement straight in it. It's pretty neat.
Here's Mr. Blake.
Hey, there he is.
Our guest.
Here I am.
There you are, Blake Bell. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Well, I thought it was Central Time and not Eastern Time, and I got messed up. Here I am.
Well, Blake, it's good. We just been kind of tap dancing. We were hoping it was something like that, and nothing serious. I was just telling Carrie before we got started that we're going to have a thunderstorm here before too much longer, and that typically knocks me offline. But,
okay.
Such is life, Y'all can carry on. Blake is going to talk with us tonight about Brahmas. And Blake, I'm going to assume now, and I probably shouldn't do that, but I would assume, based on the number of photos and comments and posts you make about Brahmas, they're probably one of your favorite breeds.
Yes, sir. Brahmas and then black Minorcas are second.
And you're working on Minorca Bantams, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Single comb and rose comb.
I don't know that I have ever seen any more Minorca Bantams.
Well, we're hoping to show a display of those at Shawnee, Oklahoma this year at the APA National. So.
Oh, cool. That ought to gather some attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I got us on the Minorcas here, and let's get back to Brahmas. Tell us where the breed is from originally.
Originally, they came from China,
mm-hmm.
but that was the ancestor of all of our Asiatic breeds. Mm-hmm. And then so the Cochins, the Brahmas, and the Langshans are all cousins, and they were really developed here in America once they got here. And what we know as a Brahma today, they didn't look anything like they do now. When they got here, they were actually more of the dark variety.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sports came, and they popped out, and they went with it, and they ran with it, and now we have Brahmas.
What originally attracted you to Brahmas? What about them just kind of lit your fire?
The bold beetle eyebrow, that just the eagle look on their face. It's very striking, and the head and the skull aren't very many points on the scale of points when you're judging them. But first impressions are everything, and we always start with the head and skull when we're judging. And on the Brahmas, it's the only breed where the head and skull are a very distinct indicator of that breed.
Explain what you're talking about when you say beetle brow. Some of our viewers might not understand that.
So the beetle brow is when their skull, like their eyebrows, basically their skull, protrudes over the eyes. It gives them a really bold look. It kind of puts a shadow on their eye, just because it's protruding so far over their eye.
And I agree with you what you were saying about the head just catches your eye first. I'm as a judge, it always did me, and I know it's not supposed to, but that's a
Yep.
fact. That's what you see first. Um, what color varieties do we have approved here in the United States?
So in large fowl, we have buff, dark, and light, which buff is not solid buff, it is buff Colombian. And then in the Bantams and the APA, we have the same dark, light, and buff. But in the ABA, there is also white and black approved.
And I know there's some other colors that are being worked on out there as well.
Yeah, there's partridge and blue partridge, silver dark. So basically, just the black on a dark is blue, or blue dark. Misspoke there.
That's all right.
And there's quite a few other varieties. I know there's a lady in Missouri working on mottleds. And they're beautiful chickens. They're not in our standard, but they're still beautiful American type Brahmas.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. What about? I know some of our folks are probably thinking, well, they're great big birds, and they might have a little concern about temperament. Is that something folks need to be worried about?
The Brahma is probably the most docile chicken in the book. They the biggest thing to worry about is tripping over them, because they're going to be at your feet like a bunch of dogs or a bunch of sheep.
I laugh because my Rhode Island Reds are the same way. I call them my trip and fall hazards.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was sitting, as you were talking, I was sitting here trying to think. I've judged a lot of Brahmas over the years, and I can't think I've ever judged one that even remotely acted like it wanted to be aggressive.
Yeah, I've never had an aggressive one. Ever, actually. And the males are pretty docile to the females. I don't like separate anything before a show. I just go straight out to the breed pen and I pull them out and take them to a show. So the males don't rough the feathers up on the females. They're just an overall gentle breed.
See, that's how you know you got a solid breeding program. When you're planning to go to the show, is to just walk outside and grab a few of them, put them in the car, and take off.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome.
Makes all the difference in the world, man. I'll tell you. Do they have any special needs, health concerns that folks need to be aware of?
On the light Brahmas specifically, they're actually built a little bit different than the darks. And I say that just because there's not a lot of buff Colombian to even compare them to. So it's kind of lights and darks. The darks are very, very good foragers. They run, they do all normal chicken stuff. They'll go find bugs and everything. The lights, if they're on full feed, I find they will sit by their feed bowl and they will just eat and eat and eat and get fat and eat, and they really won't do a whole lot of roaming. And even if I raise them with my darks, they still do the same thing. And it's almost like they're a whole different ball game on the lights and the darks.
Mm-hmm.
So the darks are an overall, they're my favorite, just because they're a lot easier to take care of than the lights, in my experience. The lights are a little more finicky with a few more health conditions, just because they are a little bit bigger. And if they're not bred with some leg length to them, they get too squatty, and then they end up just going out in their legs, and they can't do a whole lot of moving.
Yeah. I can remember years ago, I would see more dark Brahmas at a show than I would lights and especially buffs. There were hardly ever any buffs at a show. But I don't see as many dark Brahmas, at least down our way.
Yep. Dark Brahmas kind of faded out a little bit there for a little while. Um, there's a lot of big breeders now that have really put them back on the map. We have Robert Anderson in Oregon. He ships them all over the country. He has great birds. I just this spring I shipped over 70 dozen hatching eggs, and we
Wow.
had 85% hatch rate out of those hatching eggs. So we're really getting those darks back on the map.
Well, I'm glad to see that because really, as far as pattern birds go, that dark color is one of my favorites.
It's very striking. It's really pretty when it's right, and it's not so pretty when it's not.
Well, yeah, there is that. If somebody wanted to get started raising Brahmas, would you suggest they get started with hatching eggs or baby chicks, started adults or
Um,
adults?
so personally, I ship hatching eggs, and from a breeder's standpoint, I am giving the buyer the potential to get my best bird I've ever raised. And there's nothing I can do about it because they're getting him out of the same breed pens I breed from. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
for say $125 for a dozen eggs, you're getting 12 shots of getting my best bird, and then you get two birds and you can make your own. Where if I sell chicks or started adults or adults, I can always I can always pick out my best birds to keep for myself as the breeder, and then my secondhand birds, which are still really good breeder birds, then those are the ones that we sell. So I recommend hatching eggs if it is available. Most breeders won't sell hatching eggs. It's just risky, and they have their own way of doing things. So I sell hatching eggs, and then like Robert Anderson, he ships out started chicks at like 3 weeks old, I believe. So there's a lot of different options. It really depends on the setup and kind of what you're trying to get out of the project.
I'm sorry, I was just going through some of the comments here. Uh, Caitlin says, I love my Brahmas and the breed pen too. They're something, aren't they, Caitlin? And she is a fan of the buffs. And I got to agree when buffs are right, they're gorgeous. Um, but I have tried buff birds down here, and man, the sunshine just burns that color up down here. It looks terrible, and it winds up looking splotchy and just does not look good. But if you got the place for them, they are some nice looking birds.
Yep.
We are working on buffs here too. It's a slow process, but I'm using my buff phantoms and my large foul lights to make my own buffs.
We've got some pictures you sent us. If you want to, when do you want to use those? Or
Whatever you want to do, we can go through those and talk about them. Or
okay, let's do that. These are some photos that Blake sent me today. We'll start with these two.
okay,
Man, that's a nice looking light female. Oh my goodness.
that is a yearling female. She's last year's hatch. She turned a year old in like May or June. So yeah, she's really nice. Um, I wish she had a little more length to her. On that back, they're supposed to have a short tail, but
Yeah.
you can always lengthen them out, make them fill up a whole double coop. And then on the buff, she just needs to be a shade darker buff.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep her around for her type. She's got that massive Brahma skull, 3 ridges on her pea comb, which, in my opinion, if it doesn't have 3 ridges, it's not a pea comb.
I agree.
And,
Yep.
she has a nice dewlap. Those drastic, extreme earlobes that Brahma should have. That really gives them that Brahma look. I always think of Brahma cattle. They have all those wrinkles and stuff. That's how that Brahma head should look.
Now, she's got the head going on, that's for sure.
Alrighty, 2 lights. So on the lights, the struggle is getting a little bit of leg underneath them. Like I said, it's on the large trail and the bantams. They all end up being a little too short-legged. The male's better than the female here. But other than that, they're pretty good examples. There's definitely things I would fix about them. But a lot of people think the lights are prettier than all the other varieties, but I still fall for the darks every time.
I'm with you, buddy. I am with you.
And then you can't see the size difference because the bantam is ahead of the large fowl, so she looks bigger in this picture. But this is a bantam in the front, and then the large fowl pullet in the back. They're both the same age, just to show that the bantams do mature a little faster. And I mean, if you want something that you just want to show, you want to hatch it in January and show it by June, get bantams. If you don't want to show something for 18 months or 24 months, then get large fowl.
Yeah, there's just a tad difference in the way they mature and grow out.
Yeah. That's definitely the truth.
This is 2 of the best large fowl darks females I've ever raised. These go back to Frank Reese Jr.'s line. These 2 females. These are pure Frank Reese Jr. birds.
They're nice.
It's we want 3 or more pencilings on each feather. So when we go through and cull, we're looking for that. We want the penciling to go all the way down to the feet, and the foot feathers to have penciling, the fluff to have penciling all the way down. It's very hard, but it's very rewarding when you get it.
You know, a common thing I see in penciled varieties in the females is the penciling gets blurry. How do you correct that?
You have to have a male that has too much color on him. He has to have white within his breast. So a show type dark Brahma should have a solid black breast, solid black thighs, and then just that silver on top, with the primaries having that silver streak on it. But a breeder type male, to get this caliber of penciling, you have to have a male that has way too much color that you can never show. And it's basically a male and female line. And those males every time will throw color just like this.
Man, I know when I had partridge Wyandottes, that penciling gave me a fit on those females.
It's been a long road, but it's very rewarding in the end.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And folks, this is what a dark Brahma male looks like.
And I chose this picture in particular just to show that size difference. That's a big water pan, not tall, but big, with a call duck, so that you can see that, I mean, just his skull is half the size of a call duck.
It is. It's when you draw attention to it like that, I hadn't really noticed that before, but it's impressive.
They are one of the largest birds in the standard.
Yep.
I chose this picture to demonstrate the buff Colombian pattern, and then the 3 ridges on the rose comb, or the pea comb, and to have width, which Angela Han in her Crevecore video mentioned a picture with width, and then this was, it's just so important in every breed that we have birds that, looking from the front, they stand on very square legs and have width all the way through to the tail. because the width it it just helps with so many things. Egg production. It shows that they have good meat over their back, and they're not all bone. They're not all feathers either, because they can't eat feathers. And that means the females are going to lay lots of eggs. They have enough room in their internal for their internal organs to be proper, to be large enough to compensate for that large bird. Because if you have a small frame bird, or a small place for like a heart, the heart's not going to get big enough, and that bird's just not going to live very long. It's kind of like a dog. The Great Danes, they're the largest breed. They don't live very long.
Right.
If we breed them to a pedigree, they're going to live a little longer.
Makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. Okay, I think that's all of the slides we got there. But I tell you what, I could get excited about those dark females. They look really spectacular, bud.
Thank you.
Let's talk about managing Brahmas for a minute.
Okay.
What about weather hardiness?
They are very cold hardy. I mean, my coops, some of my coops are behind me. I just use hoop coops. So I use 2 cattle panels, 4 2x4s, and then chicken wire around it with a tarp. And open-ended on both sides. It gets down to -15 here. Sometimes -20. No special treatment as long as they have fresh water and feed. They'll survive all the winters. No frostbite. The heat, they need fresh water twice a day at least. Once it gets above 100 degrees, they're good to 100 degrees, but anything over 100 degrees, you'll have some fatalities.
Makes sense. What about hatching? Anything special folks need to know about hatching Brahmas?
So as far as Brahmas go, I usually run 5 females with a male. You can run a few more than that. I find best fertility is with 5 females. Sometimes he gets picky and he'll only pick 4 or 5, and then anything above that he won't mess with, just because they are so big. Takes quite a bit more work for them to breed. Other than that, I dry hatch all my eggs. I don't add any. Like I keep the humidity the same all the way through. I don't change it for the hatch, the lockdown, or any of that. It's just the same all the way through, just like a hen would. I find that if I change the humidity, the chicks are so big in the shell it'll actually drown them. Even if it goes up or down, it just messes with the eggs, so I don't touch it. That's been the best results I've got, and that's what I tell all the people that buy hatching eggs from me.
It's hard to beat the way the mama hen does it, you know?
Yep.
In all aspects of it. I was just talking with somebody today, and I said, poultry management is just common sense, you know, really, and letting chickens be chickens. That's all you got to worry about. We got a comment here. Keep on Trucking wants to talk about the eyes of the Brahma, and I see a lot with lots of wrinkly, overhanging extra skin around the eyes. Should that be culled as soon as it appears?
As long as they can see, I would call that just a Brahma face, in my opinion. As long as they can see and it's not obstructing their vision or obstructing their nostrils, their vision, or their eating ability, I would say it's fine. We got to watch for the eye shape. We want a big round eye. We don't really want too narrow of an eye, but it needs to be bold. So I wouldn't cull as long as it isn't obstructing vision.
Yeah. Well, we talked about hatching. What about brooding Brahma chicks? Anything special there?
When I brood them, I typically start them in our 5-tier brooder. They stay in there for 2 weeks. Then I move them to another wire bottom pen, and the wire helps with the foot feathering, believe it or not. I find that if I put them on the ground with dirt, the dirt will actually mess with the foot feathering more than the wire will.
Yeah.
So I put them on wire, and I get them about 2 months old on wire. And then after that, they go into our brooding sheds, and I separate our males and our females at that point, about 2.5, 3 months old. And then we just raise them out like that. And the dark Brahmas are way hardier than the light Brahmas.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the dirt messing with foot feathering more than wire does. Where you would think it would be opposite, but I've heard Craig Hansen talk about the same thing with his coachings because he keeps his. Of course, he's got banners, but he keeps them on wire floors.
Yep. I condition, like, if I do condition a bird, and that's just if I have like 5 males that are fighting or whatnot, I'll put them in conditioning pens for a show, just so they don't beat each other up. I'll put them on wire too, even as adults.
Makes sense.
And then they need lots of grass. The more grass, the better. If they have access to grass as chicks, they will be larger, hardier, just well-rounded birds.
Yep.
Well, if they're just on grain, they won't be near as good chickens, in my opinion.
You kind of do it old school, don't you?
Frank Reese taught me well.
Yes, he did. We talked about rearing. We talked about breeding. You talked about coops. What about getting a Brahma ready for a show? What do you do there?
The only ones I wash are the light Brahmas, and it's mostly flies actually that get them dirty. The little brown dots that flies leave when they land on stuff is if in the heat of the summer or in the late spring, when the flies start coming out, they'll leave these little brown dots all over the light Brahmas, and that's the only reason I have to wash them. Other than that, I just pull them straight out of the breed pen, and they go to the show.
I'm glad to hear you say something about flies because I had noticed that too, and I thought, well, I've never heard anybody else talk about it very much, so maybe I'm just imagining things, but I guess not.
Yeah, they leave those little black dots on everything. Let's see. When you do wash them, I use laundry detergent. It's all free and clear, so there's no dyes, no scent, no nothing. It makes the birds very white on the light Brahmas, and it's not harmful if they drink it. Oh well. That way, you're not losing any chickens while you're washing them, and it gets them clean.
Makes sense.
He's not the first person that I've had tell me that. I make laundry detergent as one of my businesses that I do here locally. And I actually had somebody ask me that if it was really like the brand name. And I said, well, yeah. I said, well, I'm going to use it to wash my chickens. So I wanted to make sure. I know you probably think that's funny, but that's really what I'm going to do with it. I heard about it online and I wanted to try it. And then, when she got here and she saw all my chicken stuff, she knew that I took her serious when she said that.
Got a question here. Wants to know what size wire mesh on the floor of your pens?
1/4 by 1/2. I don't use the 1/4 by 1/4. It's just a little too small.
Mm-hmm.
But I use the 1/4 by 1/2. And then we use the same stuff for all of our rabbits too. So it's just nice to use the same thing for all of your species.
Makes life a lot simpler.
Yes, it does.
We got a request here. see if I can find it. Can you show the picture of the two lights comparing large fowl and bantams? The tail sweep is different for large fowl and bantams, correct? Well, let's take a look see here.
So the tail sweep shouldn't be different, but just with the way they're being bred, you're going to have a little bit of difference.
Yes.
So on the females, your tail's medium in length, well spread at the base, resembling an inverted U. So on all of our other breeds, we want a triangle, but on the Brahmas, we're looking for an upside down U. It has to be a U, otherwise it's really not a Brahma tail. So on the lights, personally, I like the Bantam better, and I wish my lights were like my Bantams. I wish they had a sweep because I think their tail should be almost end up where their head is, so it should almost be level. And that's the old style Brahma. The new style Brahma is more like that light hen in the back, that large fowl. She has more of a flat back with just a little bit of angle at that tail, right where it ends there.
Mm-hmm.
And I like a full sweep.
Agreed. I can remember when I was a teenager, and we had probably 2 or 3 breeders here that showed Brahmas in Central Florida, and his birds' tails were well up. I mean, they were pretty much on level with their heads, and it sure made them look good.
Mm-hmm.
I thought.
Neither of them are wrong because, I mean, I have the standard here, so it says at the end of it, carried high enough to continue the sweep of back. So as long as it sweeps at all, it's still standard. And it's really up to our discretion on what we like.
Gotcha.
But a good solid tail set is one of my pet peeves. If at any age they start dropping their tail, whether it's from the heat, the cold, stress, or they're just dropping their tail, they go down the road. I want them to carry their tail under any circumstances at the right angle.
Makes sense.
Sorry, I lost my place. Deborah Hudson says, love the Frank Reese birds. I raised and showed large fowl white Cornish from his lines. Frank has some good Cornish too. Have, I need to go full screen so I can read this. Now have dark partridge and blue partridge Brahmas. Going to try to make some solid blues just for fun.
I want some of Frank Reese's turkeys.
All right, do you have any of this?
Yeah, I do. I'm going up
so.
there this weekend again to sort through some New Hampshires chickens.
I got some of his birds, his New Hampshires, for a friend of mine. He said, I've never seen New Hampshires like that. I said,
Old style.
Yeah, very much old style. But I'm an old guy, so I go for the old style.
There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all with that.
Okay. What about feed for Brahmas? Anything special there?
So this goes back to old style for me. I feed a 19% protein. I feed a mash, and I feed the same thing to every bird on the property, whether it's a duck, a goose, a chicken, a baby chicken a day old, a hen laying. They all get the same 19% protein, and the ducks, they just get a little bit of grass, and it grows them all good. And I don't believe in like changing all your feeds around because that's just going to stress them out. Like if you go from baby chick feed to a different feed, it stresses them out. And then it takes them a whole 2-3 weeks to get their gut back in balance. And all of that. So I just feed the same thing all the way through until they leave.
Like you said, you fed a mash. Is that a really fine ground mash or a little coarser mash?
It's pretty fine. It's one step above baby powder.
Gotcha. I feed a mash, but it's more of a coarse grind.
Me too. And I found once my birds got used to that mash, if I was to put a pellet in one of the feed cups now or in one of my troughs, my birds would probably look at me like I was crazy. Yep. I mean, it's for me, it's easier to handle. It smells really good. And when it's already a mesh, like they can absorb more of the nutrition out of it. So I personally have found that they consume less feed than when I was feeding a traditional pellet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can't switch feeds now. They won't eat it. Like he was saying. And the other thing is on the Brahmas, they need feed in front of them. So I said the lights eat all the time, but they also need feed in front of them all the time because they eat less that way, like 25% less if you have feed in front of them at all times. If I let them go out of feed, they'll go through 2 bags of feed in like 2 days per pen just to catch back up to where they were. Because they're big birds, they need constant nourishment. And that's kind of why I like them on this grass. Just that way they get bugs and they get grass all day long. Then they can go in and get that grain, get that feed, and sleep on that, put that in their bodies, and then go back out on the field.
Shaggy wants to know what makes a good wing for the dark color. I'm guessing he's talking about the pattern.
Probably the pattern. So when you pull the wing out, on your primaries, you just want the bottom edge to be edged in silver, basically. And it's from about halfway down the wing feather to the tip. And it's only the edge. So it's edged in silver for the primaries and the axle feather. And then when you get to the secondaries, it's the opposite side, but half of the feather is silver and half of the feather is black. And that's the practical way to put it. And then we need to make sure that those wings are carried nice and horizontal and tight to the body. Your mic's off, Rip.
Thank you. I have a bad habit of doing that when I cough and turn it off. Some people have a problem understanding that wing pattern. So I appreciate you explaining that the way you did.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah Hudson has a question here. What's y'all's opinion on fermenting the chicken feed?
Well, my opinion on fermenting feed is it's good if you have the time, the barrels, and the birds will eat it. So I've tried fermenting feed, and my birds, they don't eat it. It gets stuck in the top of their mouth because it's still wet, and they kind of get turned off by that, and they go off and they find other stuff to eat. So it doesn't work for my farm, but I mean, if you probably raised them up on it, it would probably work. And they definitely get more nutrition out of it, in my opinion. But it doesn't work for me.
You know, I tried it and I found pretty much the same thing. And really, it was more time consuming and more hassle than I was willing to devote to it at that time. I was just, that's back when I was working 80 hours a week and I just didn't have the time.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Ferment and feed, that only works if you have the time to properly manage it. If you can't properly manage it, you're dancing with disaster when it comes to being in there too long or whatever.
Yes.
And it's like both of y'all, I don't have that kind of time either.
Well, I have a little more time now, but I just gotten lazy in my old age. So, um, Pseudotropus wants to say that's a good explanation on wings. I thought so too. You done good, Blake. Um, okay, if somebody wants to learn more about Brahmas, do you have
Um,
any books you would recommend?
the first thing I would do is go join the American Brahma Club. They send out a newsletter periodically, so I think it's 3 a year. Um, there's a lot of good resources and a lot of knowledgeable people in there. Um, and honestly, knowledge from a breeder is going to serve you better than knowledge from a book, because the book, the words are there, but sometimes you don't understand them, just like the wing color. But if a breeder explains it to you, they might be able to change it just a little bit to make it to where you can understand or comprehend it. So I'd recommend just finding a breeder to mentor you in the color that you want to work with, and then just ask them as many questions as they'll answer without telling you to stop asking questions.
There is that factor, yeah.
And then
Um,
there's the standard of perfection, and that's just an invaluable resource.
yeah. What about websites? Any websites you'd recommend?
Um, I mean, Robert Anderson's website, Blue Hour Poultry, has a lot of good information about Brahmas on there. Um, he he's been doing it a long time, and I look up to him, and he's done really good with the birds. So
I really like Bob. I've judged with him before, and he is exceedingly knowledgeable in all
yes.
things poultry. What about social media groups, Facebook groups, or
So there's a few. There's a group called Brahmas. I think it's like Brahmas Project and Colors. So all of the colors get to be posted in there. It's on Facebook. There is the American Brahma Club Facebook group. They post a lot of good pictures on there and a lot of good information. And there's a few others. You just search up Brahma in your search feed, and make sure that you're in an American group, because in other countries, Brahmas have vulture hawks. So right behind the hawk, there's a triangle section of stiff feathers. And in our standard, it's a disqualification, but in their standard, you have to have it or they get disqualified. And it actually correlates with foot feathering and size. So we'll never have the foot feathering they have in Europe, but we don't have vulture hawks, so we can't.
I've never heard it explained that way, but that makes sense. Thank you. Um, Anything else you want to add, Blake?
Uh, Unless anybody else has any questions they want to comment about all I
Don't
got.
don't have anything here. Carrie, you got any questions for the good of the order here?
Yeah, Blake, I am curious. What is that over your right shoulder?
Left shoulder, or yeah, right shoulder. Okay,
Yeah.
it's backwards
Other
there.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
those are
Sorry.
dark Brahmas.
That's what I was curious if it was that or if it was turkeys.
Yeah, those. Well, they're about the size of
About the
small
same
chickens.
size.
Yeah, those are all my Brahma girls. There's 60 of them in that pen.
Nice.
We're hoping to show 30 at Shawnee, Oklahoma, for the APA National Dark Brahmas.
So
You
earlier when you
alone, or
said
you alone, Blake, or with other people?
I went into those by myself.
Oh, cool.
that's gonna be a lot of work.
You're going to be a tired puppy by the time you load all those things up and get them to the show and unload them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So earlier you were talking about how large they were. So to put it into perspective for the listeners, when you say large for a Brahma, how what does a 12, 14-month old cockerel and pullet look like as far as weight wise and maybe some kind of size comparison?
So for size comparison, I mean, the Brahmas behind me are 6 months old, and we just weighed them, and they're roughly 6.5 to 7 pounds. So they're very slow growing. But once they finish out, their dad weighs 13.5 pounds.
Gotcha. Okay.
He's 1.5 pounds over standard weight. So I like, if you think of a small dog, like that's the size of a Brahma. So I mean,
good analogy.
like,
so if we're going to KFC, a Brahma's the whole bucket.
Brahma's 2 buckets.
Okay. All right. The American breast better watch out.
Shaggy said he will see you at Shawnee.
Yep.
He's good people. Somebody's giving you a plug that you also have good information on your Facebook page about Brahmas.
I try to keep all my Facebook, on my personal profile, everything's poultry. I don't do anything that's not chickens.
Mike Franklin says that dark pen of 60 is a thing of beauty. I agree, Mike. They are something else. Well, I don't have anything else. Kerry doesn't have anything else, and Blake doesn't have anything else. So
I can go grab a Brahma real quick.
We got time.
Okay, I'm going to shut my camera off. I'll be right back.
All right, go for it. That's a treat. I've never had anybody say they just go grab a chicken for us.
I was going to say that's not something that just happens every day. That's awesome.
Well, I think Blake is the only person that we've ever interviewed or had on the show that was outside.
And I really liked it. The cicadas just really, that, and the roosters just, I mean, that screams.
Well, man, what's not to like about a rooster crowing? Come on now.
So while he's doing that, my wife and I are foster parents, and we got a new foster child last night. And she said, "Is that chickens in the back?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "That sound they make, it's kind of relaxing." I looked over at my wife and she said, "He doesn't need any encouragement."
Really? I think your wife's got your number.
Yeah, it'll be all right. Oh, look.
So this is a cockerel out of that pen. And like I said, he's only like barely 6 months old.
But he's feathering out really nice. Oh, yeah.
And then I can show on him, if you can see it, there's white edging right here on his thigh.
Mm-hmm.
That white edging is what gets the females penciling. But it's not in the standard that way because it needs to be solid black to show. But if you keep the white edging in the fluff there on the thighs, it keeps the penciling good.
So the white edging is definitely what you would need in a breeder bird.
Yes.
So you get the penciling the way it needs to be. That's awesome.
And the same thing with his breast. He has white edging on some of the feathers here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to make it like a DQ or anything. So you could show him if he's a really typey bird.
Right.
Still, but it also helps with that penciling.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to go out there and snag one of those birds and make him a TV star.
But, yeah.
And then here's your U-shaped tail.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of newcomers that message, and they ask to what pictures of the birds for sale. Well, a lot of us Brahma breeders, we send pictures of the rear view to show they have a U-shaped tail, and then often we'll get comments, "You Brahma breeders just send pictures of their rear ends." But it's very important that we have this wide U-shaped tail and not a triangle.
I agree with you. That's very much a Brahma characteristic. Very much.
On a wide-bodied bird, it's important.
Yep.
Yes. All righty. Well, Blake, we really appreciate you. Shaggy wants to know, do you double mate?
Yes and no. I have lines from 8 different breeders that I keep pure for dark Brahmas specifically. And then I have my own line, which is a mixture of all of those. But I base them all back to those 2 birds, the 2 Frank Reese birds. Those go back to Barbara Piper. And I base all of my birds back onto that line. So
I tell you what, Barbara had some magnificent birds. Golly, Bob.
So I double mate some, but a lot of it is just I pair the genetics I know that click, because some lines when I test cross them, it turns out total garbage, and you'll lose the whole crop just because it didn't work, especially for a pattern color like this. But some lines, every time you cross them, it just clicks, and then for the rest of the time, it just works. Especially when you get to the 3rd generation. The 3rd generation is just magnificent when it works.
I agree. Golly. Well, folks, we're running to the tail end of our show here. Blake, again, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with them your Brahmas with us. Carrie, thank you for being here to keep me straight tonight. I need all the help I can get. So,
My pleasure.
Folks, until next time, keep enjoying your birds and have a good weekend, a good week.